If you own a Seadoo that was manufactured 2005 or older, you have a dash like this. Literally, probably just like this, because the sun damage on this one is probably about what yours looks like by now, unless you've taken incredibly good care of it. The problem is, on an 05 and earlier machine, you're stuck. These are discontinued. So what do you do if you want to be able to know how much fuel you've got, read out any warning codes, or just in general use the information center display for what it was designed to do? Well, I've got news for you. This is something you can fix yourself for next to nothing. So what you're going to need, and I'm going to show you the way that I do it. There may be different ways, there may be better ways. This is the way I've done it, and it works good for me. What you're going to need, a hacksaw. Fine tooth metal blade. I think this is like 32 tooth per inch or something. It's a lot of teeth, very fine. You're also going to need some form of a rotary cutoff tool. Some of these iPhone screen protector, IR filter things. There's links to all this stuff in the description, so if you need any of the stuff for this that you don't already have, there's a link to it down below so that you can get it. You're also going to need one of these little trim popper screwdrivers. This is what makes all the difference in doing this without damaging anything. And you're going to need razor blade, plastic welding gun, and some 3M 5200 adhesive. The stuff that I buy comes in a big caulk tube, but you can get just little tubes of it, so you don't need to spend as much money on the tiny amount that you're going to use. So let's get started. What we're going to be doing with the shape of this gauge, this area right in here across the top, we're going to cut with the rotary tool. But all the rest of the way around, we're going to be cutting through this black material with the hacksaw. So let me show you where we're going to cut. If you find the ridge where it pops in right here, you're going to come about 1/2 inch back from that, right almost in the middle between here and this ridge. So line it up somewhere right about there in the middle. So right about there. And now the reason we're using a hacksaw is because it makes a very narrow cut, and it's also very controllable because it's such a fine thing. We can make sure that we don't break through and hurt any of the electronics. Essentially, we're just going to keep cutting along that line until we are all the way around, and all that's left is right in here where we can't get with the hacksaw. So let's come back to this in just a minute when we've got that all done. So after we're all the way around with the hacksaw, see, all we've got left is this little spot right along here. So we're going to take our rotary tool and just connect that line. Just have to kind of pull it apart gently. And now all the shavings and plastic that's everywhere, you're going to want to clean that up, kind of scrape this stuff off, because you don't want that rattling around inside. As I was cutting through with the hacksaw, you might have heard that I had something rattling around in there, and sure enough, that's what it was. What you're going to want to do is take each of the needles and just kind of spin them until they get to a spot where they just naturally want to rest. Now, it's going to be a good idea, take a picture of that orientation and kind of, know where they're pointing. So I'm going to go ahead and take a picture of this. You'll see why later. Okay. So our next step is removing these needles. Now, that's where this little trim guy comes in. A lot of guys will take and pull up on them with their hands, and that's really dangerous. You'll break off the orange parts of the needle. So with this, you can kind of get down underneath of it and just pry, pick it up off, perfectly intact. Set that off to the side. Do the same with this one. Just wiggle and pull with this guy underneath to support it. There you have it. Perfectly removed, undamaged. Now that you've got no dials, you're going to want to take a little razor blade and get up under this backing here and just work your way around. And peel this up off. Once you can get your fingers on it, you can use them. Oh! Tried a little too hard. So, you gotta be gentle around these, but usually that doesn't happen, but I'm trying to not take half an hour on the camera. So just take your time, don't be like me. Chances are, since that was a fairly clean break, we can still stick this back together and it'll look okay. But now, we've got our display exposed here. So, again, grab your razor blade and very carefully, let me get up close here. Start in a corner here and get up under this film that's on here. If you get started somewhere like that, you can kind of work your way along. And you're going to want to just work with a razor blade, peel all this film off, but again, be gentle with it, unlike I was with that. So once you get the film off, you'll see there's still a lot of glue left on there. So keep working at it until all of the glue is off as well. At this point, you can use a little like acetone or lacquer thinner or denatured alcohol or something along those lines to help soften that if you would like to. It'll make it easier to get it all off and look clean. So I'm going to go get just a little bit of acetone on a rag and just wipe that down so it softens it up. Once that LCD is as flawlessly clean as you can possibly get it, that is when our iPhone LCD polarizer comes in. So take this out of its little protective packaging. Now there's two films on this. One side is sticky and one side is just to protect for while you're applying it. Now you're going to need to also grab a pair of scissors and line this thing up and cut it to size. So just kind of look and make a cut. Yep, that'll be good for that one. Now, this other direction. About there. That looks pretty good. So now we need to peel our film off. It's the film that has this little zigzaggy type pattern on here. The pattern side is the first side we want to peel off. That's the sticky side. This is like applying a screen protector to a phone. Take it, try and put it on nice and even. If you have dirt under it, you're going to have to peel it off and do it over again, because any little bubbles or imperfections from that dirt will never come out. So once you've got that stuck down, take yourself a rag or a credit card or something and try and work the bubbles out that you do have, because it's kind of inevitable that you're going to have one or two. But just work them out. There's very, very minimal bubbles of any kind. The screen looks nice and clear. So we're going to peel off our little protective layer. That looks pretty good. Now let's put it the rest of the way back together and see how it looks when it's all lit up. So our broken cover here pops back on around each dial. Put just a little extra glue on that. If you end up breaking your display, your cover like I did, just take a little bit of this 3M high strength 90 spray adhesive and mist a little spot on there so that it sticks really good, and then just line it right up. Put it right together. And none will be the wiser unless they look really close. Now is where that picture comes in important. You need to know which direction each of these was facing. Otherwise, they're going to be all wonky and not be at the right levels. So I'm going to pull up my picture that I took in this orientation, just like this, and I'm going to look and take my needles and line them up just exactly how they were. And you don't want to pop them in too far where they drag. Still want to be nice and free. So, our tachometer now. This one was about there. Still want a little gap in between here. Don't get it super close or it'll drag when it touches here. So now that you've got them back on and they're in the same orientation as your picture, take them and dial them back around till they touch zero. Now we're done inside of the gauge. So we need to clean all of this mess up that we made cutting it apart and then reseal the shell. So I'll clean all this up and then let's work on resealing the shell after I've cleaned up all this little loose stuff here, just break it off. But after I've got that done, we'll come back and show you how to reseal the shell. Okay, now that we've got all the plastic cleaned up around our gauge, we're going to need to stick it back together. And this little plastic welding, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's not really plastic welding. It's like a hot stapler, I guess is the technical term. Put these little hot staple zigzag looking things in there. And let me show you what happens. We're going to take our two pieces, reinstall them together. We want to leave the same gap of what we cut. Line this up just perfect. And take our hot stapler, pull the trigger, and just let it melt in, and then let off the trigger. And after a few seconds, pull it out. And we're going to put in probably 5 or 10 of those, just so that we're nicely supported all the way around. And once we've got enough in there that it's stable and solid, take and bend off these tabs and make sure they don't go down in that crack, because that would defeat the purpose. Having metal down in there, shorten stuff out. So break off all these guys. Now, take your rotary tool and just smooth everything out nice. So once you've got this hot stapled back together, everything ground down nice and smooth, you're going to want to take your 5200 and just run a light bead all the way around here. Now obviously it would make more sense to use black 5200, which is what I will link, but I'm using this maroon so that you can really see what I'm going to do after I've got the bead all the way around. Okay, so once you've got a nice bead around there, have some rags handy, and you're going to take and just smear that and smooth it out, but try to push it into the crack so that it really seals up good. Just go all the way around. Make it nice and smooth. If you notice little air pockets, go back and smooth it into them, because we want this to be sealed. Once you've got that nicely smoothed out, just how you want it, wipe your finger off, because this 5200 is really nasty stuff. And then you're going to wait for this stuff to harden. Now you could use 4200 or something that hardens a bit quicker, but this stuff is a bit better in my opinion. It's more of a permanent seal. So once that's done, let it dry. It takes about a week or so for this stuff to cure 100%. You can probably reinstall it in a matter of a couple days, but that'll give you a good watertight seal so that you don't get a cloudy dash later on down the road. So let's come back to this in a couple days and see how it looks. There you have it. With some tools that you may already have and a few basic supplies, you can turn your sun-damaged Seadoo gauge cluster back into this. Easily readable, almost as good as when it was new. And hopefully this has been useful to you. Certainly if you have a Seadoo with this style gauge cluster by now, it's probably not looking too hot there on that LCD. So hopefully it's been helpful to you. And as always, thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.